great to walk into a situation and know you've got everything under control? And don't we think that that's what true experts and the real leaders do? They walk into every situation with everything in hand. I know that's what I used to think. So there it was, I'm 29 years old, I'm 6'2", 205 pounds, I'm a second-degree black belt. I'm training 6 days a week, and I'm going around competing alongside my nationally ranked instructor. And I had one of those plans. Pretty much worked every time. And it kind of went like this. When the judge said go, I would literally kick my opponent completely out of the ring. It made him think twice about getting too close to me. Took him away from my weaknesses, right towards my strengths. Pretty much worked every time. So we're at a tournament, and judge calls my name. I take my always winning strategy, and I walk into the ring, and this is what I see. My opponent is huge. I'm literally staring at his chest. And I realize my strategy is useless. In fact, if I do what I've always done, I'm going to get killed. And immediately I see that I have to give up on the strategy and rely instead on my training. And it would become the most important fight of my life because it was there that I learned a valuable lesson that would serve me not only in martial arts, but in business and in leadership too. That's why I learned the difference between doing and being. Look, black belts have trained themselves to do some pretty amazing things. They can take somebody out in one shot. But being a black belt is so much more than just those things. And when you're running a company, when you're serving in a leadership position, you have to do some really important tasks. But being a leader is so much more than just those tasks. So I was working with a group of business leaders and business owners a while back on this issue of being a leader. And I had one gentleman that was very talkative early on, and it started to kind of disengage from the conversation, or so I thought. So I asked him about it. And he says to me, Scott, I think I get it. It turned out that he had just gotten this concept of doing and being. He said, I've run my company, I've owned my company for a number of years, and by all statistics, I'm successful. I make a decent living. My company's doing well. He said, but lately I've been working longer and longer hours for not a whole lot of return. And I was sitting here thinking as we talked that a couple of years ago, a friend asked me to join the board of a youth sports organization. And of course, subsequently, I was moved up to chairman of the board. He said, now it's not a little teeny organization, it's like 1,000 kids. That's 1,000 applications and application fees that have to be processed and filed. It's 1,000 kids that have to be divvied up amongst some coaches who are going to volunteer their time. That's a significant amount of court space or field space to take care of all that. And forget about game day. Somebody has to be at a concession stand to cook at 6 in the morning, and somebody's got to order all those supplies, and it's got to be staffed all day. He said, what I realize is that because that's not my business, and I don't have an iron in the fire, I spend a lot less time. But my time is spent creating a vision and empowering people. And I just sat here and I was realizing more gets done in that organization with a couple hours of my time than gets done in my business. And just like that, he realized he had to be a leader instead of a do-it-all-myself business owner. Like him, I've come to see that it is this transformation from doing to being that makes all the difference. And it's the one thing you have to remember when you leave here today. So I've been teaching martial arts for over 25 years now, and these guys, believe it or not, still do a lot of marketing for me. And so do these guys. And in those same 25 years, I've been a CEO and a COO, a consultant, a trainer, a teacher. And what I've come to realize is that these guys have a lot in common with these guys. All are formidable in their own way. They have skills we know about. They're successful. They're capable. And there's more to them than meets the eye. Kevin Plank and Reed Hastings. They create a category of one companies. They're successful. They're rich. But it's the basis of those companies. It's the way that they treat their employees. It's the things they're trying to create in society, the things they do in their own communities that makes them true leaders. Now, you don't have to run a category of one company to lead like a black belt. In fact, I would say to you that your organizations, your nonprofits that you serve, this chamber, your community could benefit from you learning and using some of the skills and attributes of a black belt leader. In my parallel careers, I've come to see that living the principles that push you to master black belt status also push you to be a true leader. Now, I'm not talking about somebody who does leader-like things. We've all seen that person, right? They're busy. They're filling out forms and reviewing reports and creating reports and holding meetings and networking. They're meeting their deliverables, which is important. But that's managing. Talking about true leadership. A true leader is busy creating an environment where the right things are done by the right people at the right time. They're creating an environment where conflict, in its inevitability, is seen as an opportunity for growth rather than something to be avoided. They're creating an environment where creativity and productivity and innovation are the driving forces. You see, to be a true leader, you have to manage, you have to meet deliverables, and you have to live by principles. Because one day, the always winning strategy is going to fail, and you're going to have to fall back on who you are. So this morning, what I'd like to do is share with you 4 principles that will take you from doing leader-like things and move you in the direction of being a true leader, a black belt leader. So the first principle, black belt leaders transform the circumstances around them. Now this is a bigger deal than you might imagine because it's not just a vision, right? Most people I know have a vision of how things could be better. Certainly anyone in a leadership position in pretty much any business has a vision of how it could be better. But it goes beyond that. It's having the energy and the stamina to completely change the status quo. Reed Hastings, CEO of Netflix. So here's a guy that, by his own admission, created a company because he was tired of late fees for his movie runners. Now, that's some of you. Most of you, I'm sure, remember those days. But let me just remind you, in case you've forgotten. You know, it used to be when you wanted to rent a movie, you had to get in your car and go to your local Blockbuster, and you kind of hustled back to the new release section, and you hoped they had a copy of what you wanted to see. And then you kind of took it to the front desk, and they told you when it had to be back. Sometimes that might be 24 hours later. And if you missed that deadline, you started incurring fees. Sometimes those fees would be double and triple the actual cost of the movie. Now here's the thing, he wasn't the only one that said, this is ridiculous. He wasn't the only one that was tired of paying fees. He wasn't the only one that said, there's got to be a better way. But he was the one with the energy and the stamina that created a company that completely changed how we look at movie rentals. Now, you don't have to transform circumstances at that level to lead like a black belt. But you have to think about it like this. Managers create outcomes within a set of circumstances. So basically, they accept the circumstances as they are. They work with their people, and they create efficiencies and outcomes. We need managers. But leaders look at those circumstances and look for the opportunity to throw those completely out and usher in new circumstances that allow us to create even greater outcomes and efficiencies. So I had a young lady who worked for me a number of years ago. Her name was Cynthia. And Cynthia was the kind of person that everybody wants on their team. Bright, enthusiastic, easy to talk to, engaging, invested in customer outcomes. And as good as she was today, she wanted to be even better tomorrow. She was invested in training. But like all employees, there's always that one drawback, right? So she was one of those people that's always late. And we know what kind of impact that can have on a team or a work group. And she wasn't just a little late. She was one of those special people that the space-time continuum just kind of moved differently. It just didn't exist for her. Yeah, see, we've all seen those people, right? Now, a manager would sit down with Cynthia, and they would confront her about her lateness, and they would talk to her about why she's so late, and they would offer her some tips on how to be on time, and they would start to set goals around her lateness, and they'd track her lateness, and they'd keep meeting with her, and, larger, more sophisticated company, they'd engage their progressive discipline policy. You see what I'm getting at here? What we would be managing is the one thing she doesn't bring to the table. For all the other stuff that she brings, we're trying to manage that one that she's missing. So we knew we had to transform the circumstance. Here's how we did it. So first, we of course made sure that everybody understood that being on time is something that we valued in our culture. So meetings started on time and ended on time. And just because somebody wandered in late, we didn't stop what we were doing and explain to them where we had been. Second, we did borrow a strategy from martial arts called defanging the snake. If you remove the bite from your situation, it won't have the impact. So we kind of infused our culture with a running joke about the difference between real time and Cynthia time. And when we set meetings times or we set appointments, we had our half hour earlier was Cynthia time, but real time was a half hour later. And then the third part, which is the hardest part, is we have to find a way to turn her weakness into a strength. So, like a lot of you, like I said, we had customers. Some of those customers are a little less reliable than others, let's just say. So they'd have a 4:30 meeting on any given day. They'd call it 4:15 and say, I'm running late. Can we do 6 o'clock? And I'm sure all of you know with employees, nobody likes to come in at 8:30 and at 4:15 be told they need to stay till 7:30 to deal with a customer who got mixed up in their timing. So we tapped Cynthia. And here's the thing. Because she is invested in customer outcomes, because she enjoys that experience, and because time moves differently for her, she jumped at the chance. And almost overnight, her lateness went from something that we tolerated to something we celebrated. Now, it's not always that easy, and honestly, that was a long process. But what you have to do is you have to think about it from this standpoint. When I want to transform circumstances, I only have to ask one question. What would be the perfect situation? I start with the perfect, and I work my way backward from there. I adjust my behavior based on moving toward the perfect. So I met Derek at an alternative school that I managed for a number of years. And Derek was a smart kid. He was exceedingly bright. He was a likable kid when he was calm. He was also a big kid, bigger than me, and weighed about 270 pounds. 16, 17 years old. I use the term kid loosely. And he was an angry kid. And like a lot of those kids at that school, he had a lot to be angry about. When things went south for him at home, he'd come to school fist flying. He was intimidating not only to his fellow students, but he was intimidating to the staff. Big kid. And we tried all the things you're supposed to try, right? Some of them worked a little bit for a little while, but nothing really changed it dramatically. We knew we had to transform. So we got together and we talked about what's the perfect situation. Well, the perfect situation would be for this large, angry kid to recognize when he was starting to get angry, recognize what really caused it, and change the way that he behaved when he was angry. Now, anger being the core emotion all of us have felt, that's a tall order for any of us, let alone a 17-year-old kid in a bad situation in an alternative school. But nonetheless, that was perfect. So I'm walking between the two wings of the school one day, and I come through the doorway, and I come across one of those Derek situations. I could tell it was one of those because there was a couple staff standing in the hallway, not sure what to do. And here's Derek, larger than life, red-faced, fist balled up, cussing like a sailor. I'm the new guy on the scene, so, of course, he gets right up in my face, inches from my face. After a few more cuss words and a couple of threats how he's going to punch me, I still remember his comment. It was, "What are you going to do, karate boy? You going to call a code?" So in those days we carried radios, and we would call a certain code on the radio in a situation like this. And a group of staff would come running, and long and the short of it is we'd tackle the kid, and it would restore order for the moment, but it certainly took control away from that student. Knowing what perfect was, I took a risk. I said, "Look, I'm not going to call code. The way I see it, you've got two choices. Either you're going to take a swing at me, and we're going to go down one path, or you're going to choose not to. We'll go down some other path." Now, I'm hoping for option number two. And I'm willing to help however I can. Now, it wasn't magical words, but for whatever reason that day, it must have intrigued him because he took option number two. And it wasn't long after that we found ourselves in the gym taking turns hitting a punching bag. And I was helping him with how to punch correctly. And we ended up talking about the things that were really making him angry, not the stuff that was going on in school. And here's the kicker. It was only a few days later that he came to school after one of those mornings at home. And he got off the bus and he found the first staff he could, and in an angry way, said, "Somebody better take me to the gym." Now it's easy to see why we would take so much energy and effort to transform the life of a kid. But what I would say to you is, from the challenging customer to the challenging employee, a challenging social situation, a challenging financial situation in your business, you will constantly be faced with the question, do I manage my circumstances or do I transform them? A black belt leader knows when to transform circumstances and then does it, no matter how difficult it may be. So principle number 2, black belt leaders know you can't grow in isolation, you have to test your doubt. So people come to me all the time and they ask for private lessons. I think they think that they'll move quicker if they're working independently. because of this principle that for over 25 years now, my answer is always no. I can teach them the do part of karate. Blocks and kicks and punches and stances. I can't teach them the be part in isolation. Things like courage and confidence and respect. Now, respect is so important that if you were to come and join one of my classes, the very first thing I would teach you to do is to bow and show respect to the instructors that teach you, to the place where you learn, and to your fellow students who are on the journey with you. Respect is the underpinning of all good martial arts and all good business, too. The power of respect is often overlooked. We talk about it a lot. But I'm talking core respect. See, in martial arts, when we're practicing potentially lethal strikes or painful takedowns, we work with partners. Inevitably, somebody slips or makes a mistake. Somebody gets hit or hits the floor, and it hurts. There's no hard feelings. There's no repercussions. There's no payback. Because respect is the cornerstone of everything that we do. If I could punch somebody in the face with respect, clearly I can confront somebody's behavior with respect. I can meet with a team and help them get better with respect. I can part company with an employee with respect. We can walk away still okay. As leaders, respect has to be the foundation of the culture that you create. And you can't learn about the power of respect in isolation. So I use the imagery of breaking when I work with groups that are interested in breaking through to the next level of success. Works a lot with salespeople. We talk about things like focus, impact, momentum. But the big aha for these highly independent people, well, that comes when they realize that they can't even attempt to break through without someone's help. They need someone who challenges their efforts, because it's the challenging that leads to confidence. And it's the confidence that gives them the courage to even attempt to break through in the first place. So, you can imagine that this is actually what we break. You can imagine when I hold one of these up in front of my class, this patio block, this chunk of concrete. You're welcome to pick it up when you come up later. Home Depot, they're like 79 cents. I get a lot of funny comments when I do this. I hear things like, I'm not doing that. You can't make me do that. Master Scott, I can't afford to break my hand. You see, teaching them the skills is the easy part. I know they have the skills. I've trained their skills. I've tested their skills. I'm only holding this up because they're capable. But helping them to develop the confidence to take those skills and use them in a way that involves risk, that's the tricky part. You see, true confidence comes from confronting your doubts. It's why martial artists do things like punch blocks. And it's why true leaders surround themselves with people who challenge them. Because the more times you're challenged, the more opportunity you have to face your own doubt. And the more times you face your own doubt, the more opportunities you have to develop true confidence. Now, here's the thing about confidence. If I'm not confident, I will not have the courage to break through to my next level of success. I won't even attempt to punch the lock. If I am lacking confidence, I will not have the courage to transform my circumstances. Exactly. It's the person who is lacking courage, lacking confidence, that falls back on policy. So they do procedure instead of call the code. Remember Derek when I'm right in his face with his fist balled up and he's threatening to punch me. The easy out is to call the code, follow policy, do procedure. But in that moment, it's not my skills that matter. I have all kinds of skills. But in that very moment, in a very tense situation, the question is, do I have the confidence in those skills to attempt to change my circumstances in a meaningful way by using those skills in a way that involves risk? Clearly, I didn't know whether he was going to punch me. So ultimately, if you're going to have the courage to transform circumstances, then you have to develop true confidence. And the only way to develop true confidence is by facing your doubt. And the only way to face your doubt is to be challenged. And you can't do that in isolation. So the third principle. Black belt leaders understand that movement toward perfection is what matters most. So I tell people all the time, karate is the pursuit of perfection that is ultimately futile. Some people don't always get it right off the bat. But I follow that up with, it's okay because it's not the perfection that matters, right? The perfection is what catches our eye. But it's the pursuit that matters. It's the urge to always make things better. It's the urge to make things stronger, more flexible, more resilient. It's the urge to move forward instead of remaining behind in the status quo. That's what's important. It's the movement. So one of my jobs, excuse me, I was tasked with reducing an unwanted outcome. So, I did all the right things. I recruited a task force of people from throughout the organization. It's a fairly large organization. And we studied the problem, and we looked at alternatives, and ultimately we chose a response. We developed trainings around that response, and we implemented those trainings for our people. We implemented the whole process, and then we tracked it, we tweaked it. It was a fairly rapid turnaround. It was maybe 3 or 4 months. We had reduced that outcome by almost 60%. So that's how I ended up in the executive committee at the celebration when we unveiled the report, which was fine. So it got to the point where they kind of packaged that all up and put it on the shelf and started talking about the next set of priorities. So, unable to contain myself, I said, whoa, hell, hold on, wait a minute. We just put all this effort into this, and in a very short time, we reduced it by 60%. We can keep going all the way to 0. That's how I ended up in the meeting after the meeting in my boss's office. And in a conversation that kind of went like this. You know what your problem is, Scott? Your problem is you don't know how good we have it here. Now, I have some colleagues in some other organizations similar to this. I'm going to make some phone calls, and I want you to go and visit them. And maybe when you see how bad it is there, you'll come back here and appreciate this place a little bit more. This is what popped into my head. This is from Monty Python and the Holy Grail. It's Monty Python's version of the King Arthur story. I highly recommend it. And so that's King Arthur in the background there in white with his squire and his trusty coconuts. And he's out looking for knights to join him on the round table. And he's come across these two common citizens who are happy to engage him in a political discussion. And their job is to go every day and work in a big bog full of, I'll call it dung. Not the word from the movie. So I look at my boss and I go, you're right. If I'm standing knee-deep in a pile of dung, and I'm looking at the guy that's waist-deep in a pile of dung, I say I don't have it so bad. But if I'm looking at the guy in the grass, well, then I look down and I go, I'm standing in dung. And I start moving towards the grass. It's the movement that matters. If you ever hear someone in your organization say something like, look, I'd really like to help you out, but this is the way we've always done it. Or, this is our policy. You're standing still, stuck in mediocrity, status quo. Look, there's a time to implement policy, and there's a time to implement judgment. When you implement policy, you do. When you implement judgment, you be. And that goes for your people, too. Black belt leaders consciously empower their people to move toward perfection. Now, the funny thing about this one is we kind of know the companies where this is part of their culture. We know it intrinsically. Think of companies like Zappos, Under Armour, Starbucks, Apple. We go and buy their products because we know that they're top of the line. But here's the important thing. We also look forward to the next iteration because as good as this one is, the next one will be even better. It's because of this. When you pursue perfection with intention, what you create is perpetual transformation. The fourth principle. Black belt leaders get that you're either on the path or you're pretending. So I brought this along today, and I'm sure you can't see it from the back, but this is actually one of my original uniforms. It's over 30 years old. And this is my original black belt. There's only 3 stripes on it because at some point I had to get a new one. If I took this and put it on you, you'd look like a black belt. But you're not. And the same is true in leadership. Just because you have the title doesn't mean you are a leader. Now this one's a little tricky to talk about. Partly because it's not polite to accuse somebody of faking it or pretending. But I think it's more than just that. I think it's the flip side of that coin. It's not accusing other people. It's our own fear that we're that person. It's that confronting your doubt thing again. We know that person, right? They take the leadership promotion for all the right reasons. They've put in their time. They have the qualifications. They know what the job looks like. They know what they're supposed to do. So they accept the promotion. And because they know what it looks like, they know what the plan is, they get busy doing all the right things. But eventually, they run into a situation where they have to make a decision that's good for the company, but harmful to somebody that matters to them. Eventually, they start to get tired. All the stuff they're doing never ends. Eventually, the path forward isn't so clear and the plan's not working anymore. And they realize they don't have the energy and the stamina to go all in on every decision every day. Somewhere in there, they realize they have been pretending all along. They're doing all the right things, but they haven't really become a leader. And unfortunately, it usually happens after everybody else already figures it out. Now, this is difficult to talk about from another perspective as well. This is kind of a societal issue. We live in a society where we achieve and we move on. I go to school for 4 or 5 or 6 years. I study, I go to all my classes, I write the papers, I take the tests. And at the end, I'm awarded my diploma. Or I go back to a training program to get my certification in whatever. In either case, it lands me with a piece of paper that I frame and I hang on my wall. And I update my resume, and I update my LinkedIn profile, and I celebrate. And the next day, I go back to work. I've been there, done that. I've got that. That's a new qualification to add to my impressive resume. And martial artists go through a similar process, right? We train for years and years and years, and we eventually get to a place where our instructor says, you know what, you're ready to test for your black belt. We go through one more grueling couple-hour test, and at the end, we've proven ourselves. We've done everything we were supposed to do, and we've achieved our black belt. We've earned it, and we're awarded the title. And similarly, we get a certificate that we hang on the wall, and we update our profiles, and put on our resumes. We celebrate. But the next day, we're back in class. We're back in class because to stay a black belt, you have to keep training. There's things to perfect. There's people to help along the path. There's adaptations you have to make as your body gets older. And here's the kicker. We don't do it because it's policy. We do it because after all this time, it's just who we are. As leaders, you cannot rest on your past accomplishments. You cannot pretend. You have to keep moving. You have to stay on the path. There are no limits. There are only plateaus. And you must not stay there. You must go beyond them. So ultimately, you have to be okay with the fact that you'll never have it nailed. You have to be okay with the fact that every situation, every circumstance has its own unique quality. Black belt leaders live principles that allow them to approach every situation, every circumstance with courage and confidence and respect. Black belt leaders stay on the path, and they live those principles over a lifetime. From time to time, you're going to run into your own mountain of a man. And as a black belt leader, you can trust your training and your principles and your skills to show up when you need them most. I don't recall the point total that day in my contest. But I know this, I know I won. I won because I learned a lesson that I still use today. You must work hard. And then work hard some more. You must train. You must grow. And then train and grow some more. And you have to persevere. And then you let go of the idea that you can ever have it nailed. You let go of the idea that you can create the perfect plan. You let go of the idea that everything has to go according to the plan. And then you just be. You live your training. You live your principles. And you become a leader. So everyone in this room is in some position of leadership. So my challenge to you this morning is simply this. Don't just do leadership. Be a leader. And use these principles to guide your way.
Thank you, Scott. Presentation. Before I say a few more words about Scott, I want to thank Captain University, Heather Gesford, for showing your leadership in this program. Thank you for helping bring Scott to us. Thanks, Scott, for sharing his vision of leadership. So the rest of the story of how I met Scott was probably 5 or 6 years ago. Part of my work with Frederick was running leadership for the county program. And I met with Scott and Mark and Alan and a couple other folks. And I remember Scott specifically saying, I don't like how this program's going. He had been through the program a year or two before. So I said, well, how would you like to fix it? And so we went about as a group fixing it and bringing some of his principles at the time. I don't think he had named them yet. But this principle one, looking at circumstances, throwing them out, and then transform them into what the perfect situation would be, no matter how difficult it would be. And so we had some difficulties and challenges. I believe, though, that because of Scott's influence and of other folks who worked with us, we transformed that program because we wanted to do something different with it. And so it can be done. And so courage, respect, confidence, risk, all great characteristics of true leadership. So Scott, thank you again for helping us move toward perfection. And thank you for your investment in leadership. Scott will be here for a few minutes. If you want to bring your book over and visit with him and have him signed, he'll do that. And we'll look forward to seeing you at the next chamber event. Donna has a hand up. Yes.
Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask Scott?
Thank you. So Scott is here. Do you have any specific questions? All right, well, Scott will be here, over here signing your books if you like, and you can visit with him. Let's give Scott another round of applause.